We acknowledge this land we meet on is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. We extend respect to the cultural authority of all Aboriginal and First Nations people.
Podcast.
Amy and is a podcast that explores all kinds of bookish things, and that can include some pretty adult content. So please be aware that some of this content will be not safe for work or for young ears, and be careful who's listening when you are. Should we get started?
Yep.
Yeah, let's do
I
this.
feel like someone needs to sing the theme song or something.
Oh,
Feels a bit weird. Maybe we should play it in the background.
Every
Should
time.
just get Johnny to, come in
Yeah,
and
just-
Yes.
play a chord or two. Anyway, welcome to our second live book club of the Amy and podcast. I'm Amy. I do want to acknowledge before we start, because when we finally turn this into a polished episode, we will include the acknowledgement of country, but we don't do it live. So I think I forgot last month, but I do want to acknowledge that we're meeting on Kaurna land here in South Australia tonight, and that I'm particularly down by Karawira Parry, or the River Torrens in Tantania in Adelaide, and I am very thrilled to be part of the traditions and storytelling of this country, and I extend my respects to all First Nations people wherever you are, and to their elders past and present. Welcome to our Climate Fiction Month. It's a pretty heavy topic, climate fiction, but I think we've actually had quite a fun month dealing with the end of the world as we know it. I'm here tonight. We Justina, our beloved Justine, is actually sick tonight, so won't be on camera, but I think is in the chat. So if anyone is in the chat and wants to chat to Justina, she'll be there. I've seen pictures. She's got her cocktail. She's got her melting moments. So she's in a festive spirit, even if she can't talk because she's coughing too much.
Hi, Justina.
Hey, Justina. But I am thrilled to have with me here today Millie Heffernan and Peyton Hogan
Hello.
and Harry Stewart
Hi.
and Abby Guy.
Hello.
I forgot that this gets turned into an audio medium. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Millie
yeah.
waved. For those of you wondering, she's not just very, very, they're just not very, very quiet. So our book of the month this month was Aya de Léon's Side Chick Nation. And I'm pausing there because I've been saying Aya's name right like for years, and then suddenly got stage fright tonight and have been pronouncing it wrong all day. So
When that happens.
it's just like live shows for fun. So I read this book first maybe a year and a half ago, I think, maybe a year ago, as part of a project we were doing on climate fiction, Alex, Rachel and I, looking at different genres. And you met Rachel and Alex a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. If you didn't listen to that episode, please go back and have a listen, because they're both really amazing. And when they talk about the climate, I don't feel quite so depressed when they talk about climate fiction. So this book, when we were looking for different kind of genres that might be covering climate fiction that we don't think about as climate fiction, this book really kind of rose to the top. And we kind of put it number one on our list to read, and I'm not sorry that we did. And we have an article coming out later this year kind of talking about this book and a couple of other books, because it is such a genre-bending book. So before we start talking about it, I'm just going to introduce the author, and then we will, between us, see if we can describe the plot to you. And I have the blurb here, so we're going to see how accurate we are.
We might need it,
yeah. But first of all, I want to introduce you to Aya de Léon, for those of you who don't know her. And I don't know how well known she is in Australia, because these books are mass market paperbacks, which we don't always get a lot of in Australia. Peyton works at a bookseller, and I don't know if you've seen them around. But Aya's actually just mind-blowingly accomplished. I've never met her, but I feel like I know her just from reading her work. So she's a writer of poetry, prose, stage, and screen work. She is the director of June Jordan's Poetry for the People. She teaches at University of California, Berkeley. She's an executive editor at the new climate justice fiction imprint, which launched in 2023, which is called Fighting Chance Books. She also organises with the Black Hive, which is the climate justice formation at the Movement for Black Lives. And she's written a whole series of, they're really mass market romances, but not just mass market romances. So they call this one a romantic suspense, but it's actually doing heaps of stuff. Like it is such a roller coaster and an adventure of a book. So, team, what happens in this book? What is this book about?
What doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thriller, it's a social justice book, it's a climate fiction book.
It's so
pretty
political.
amazing. You
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen next.
I said
Yeah.
off camera that it just, like, out of nowhere, it just becomes so intense.
Yeah.
And I was like,
You think you're reading one thing, and then basically the climate disaster happens,
yeah.
and then it just changes the whole story, basically. Which gives away some of the plot, but
Yeah,
we haven't
but-
really explained what happens. Sorry, everyone.
No.
The prologue, there is a prologue at the beginning. So when you open the book, so this won't spoil anything, it starts with our heroine Dulcie almost drowning in a hurricane. So it's Hurricane Maria, for those of you who remember. So the book was written in 2019. Obviously, a lot has happened in the world since 2019. But so she is almost drowning in this kind of climate disaster. And then we go back in time and kind of learn how she got there.
Yeah.
So where is she when we meet her in chapter 1, folks?
She's
This is like a
sidekick.
tutorial now. This is where you all go silent.
Yeah.
In the Caribbean?
Is it? Yeah. No, it's Miami, isn't it? Isn't
She's
she?
on the run.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, she's on the
from
run
Further
after
back than
escaping
that.
a sugar
Lucy.
daddy.
Yeah. And she's like, I was pretty powerful as a side chick. And I'm like, oh, slay. Well, Quinn.
So it seems like it's a common pattern in her life that she'll have a boyfriend and then she'll maybe get into some hot water and have to dip for a little while, and then she can sort of return home to New York. It's New York, right?
It's New York where she's
Or
from. Yeah.
Miami, or yeah.
Some
you
place.
can-
I'm doing well
Yeah.
on place.
America confuses me. It really does. Because I kept thinking when I was reading it that I was like, Miami, where's Miami? And then
Oh, Harry.
my partner was like, Miami, Florida. Come on, it's the second word that comes after Miami. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
But I
Golden
mean, I
Girls
think
set in Miami.
I think the thing to take home is that, yes, it is. It is. The thing to take home, I think, is that it's where she starts is in the global north, right? Is in
Yeah.
a rich first world nation where she's not from there, she's fled there.
Yeah.
And then she has to flee safety,
Yeah.
right? So what happens next? Who's the love interest if this is a romance?
Xavier.
No.
Xavier.
Did we
The
like
Hot
him?
journalist she meets
The
on the
hot-
plane.
I feel
Yeah.
like when you're first introduced to him, because she first meets him on the plane, right?
Mm.
And I felt like I didn't realize in that moment, oh, this is the love interest.
Mm.
It didn't like register for me in the same way that a like classic romance novel does until
Yeah.
later, until he comes back later, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Ah. yeah.
It is interesting. So it's like
Is
he-
this... Sorry, Pate,
yeah,
you
I
go.
don't know. No, I don't know what I was gonna say. I was gonna say something like it's almost like he doesn't need to appear that soon, but at the same time he does, because then it would be kind of random if he just took her on a
Yeah.
date.
Well,
Like
so
they
there's
have that
not
history.
there's not like the line of like he is so tall and so hot and so handsome and he's the
Yeah.
most hot guy she's ever seen, and you just know this is the hero. In fact, he's kind of he's a political reporter, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe part of it is just that like he is so not what she's looking for. She's never, it's not like other romance novels where you can kind of tell pretty quickly that what they want deep down, whether they consciously realize it or not, is to fall in love. In this book, you don't really get that at all. She's like she's buried that feeling so deeply that it's like anytime she interacts with a man, she has to instead categorize him in terms of like wealth and things like that, because that's
I was gonna
her
say she
survival.
makes such a thing about describing how she knows from sight. She can be like, that's a really rich guy, and this, and like she goes out of her way to describe the love interest as not being that, as being the opposite of that. So you're like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But he's
Not
not
what
guy.
she's looking for.
He's
Well,
not
it's almost you
useful
almost
to
do
her,
what
right?
she does in that moment, right? Because she also in
Mm.
that moment doesn't view him as a romantic interest for her. I think she does, but like not in the same way that a romance novel does. So you,
Yeah. It's
as
just
the reader,
different,
kind
isn't
of
it?
skim over him in the same way.
Do you think
Yeah.
that's because in a romance novel, I mean, and we're talking like heterosexual romance novel, what we see is someone finding a protector, right? Like even if they say that's not what's happening, there's like a sense of a patriarchal protector or like a, that alpha male kind of, or even if he's not an alpha, he's, as we've talked about before, got the markers of spectacular masculinity, right?
Yeah.
But for Dulcie, she's explicitly looking for a financial protector.
Yeah.
So
That's so
it's a
true.
much more contractual thing. Like she didn't want to play a game about it. She wants to have the contract of like, I'll be your side chick.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Because we come into this like this is book four, didn't we say in the
Mm.
series, right? And I feel like you kind of you get thrown into it and you get a little bit of your back, like a little bit about where she's come from and how she's gotten here. But like from maybe chapter three, you're well aware that how awful the situation was where she'd come from, what had happened with the uncle, all of this stuff that shapes her so early on that it really does feel it's so overwhelming to read because it's so like it feels like it does break a bunch of
Yeah. It's almost
genre
like
formulas.
her I don't know, character trajectory is the reverse of what you would normally get in a romance.
Hmm.
In a romance or in a classic stereotypical romance where they do end up with the protector, she kind of needs the opposite. Her whole thing is that she needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet because she's always had to depend on men, and this is how she's managed to get herself out of that kind of rut, basically.
Hmm.
And the book, I feel like it doesn't romanticize any of that either. Like there is violence, there
Yeah.
is threat, there is precarity constantly. Like her life is just precarious.
Yeah.
And then when she goes home, so she has to run away from the guy, I've forgotten his name, the guy she's running away from at the beginning.
Lucian.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that Lucian? Yeah.
Lucian.
And
The drug guy.
the drug dealer. And so she runs home to Puerto Rico and finds that her family's land is being stolen and everything is under threat. And suddenly she has to be the protector. Like she, and I think this is so interesting to me because I think you can kind of feel it in political movements that often women of color have to be the agents of change because there is no one else. And you
yeah.
kind of see that when Dulcie goes home to Puerto Rico and everything, like there's her cousins and her grandmother and her whole family are vulnerable and there's only her.
Mm.
Um, and I thought it was interesting that when she calls for help, it's other women. Like it becomes kind of like
Yeah.
a heist book. Everyone knows like an adventure book, a heist book. It's all this kind of crazy stuff happening.
Yeah.
But
And even
it's a
Dulcie is
team of
sort of
women.
kept like outside of the group at first because people don't quite trust her. Like Marisol doesn't quite trust her. And then she has to prove herself, which I was so sad for her. I was like, she's an angel, trust her. And then they almost got her like killed by the police for it, for not telling her that they were stealing from her ex sugar daddy. I was like, what are you doing? Anyways.
The whole breaking into the safe was so intense with
Yeah.
the screw, the replacing with the fake screws. I was like, damn, you're a pro. Like, this is so
Yes.
impressive. Like, I shall put these fake screws into the little hole
Yeah.
here. And then, like, I was, it
I
It
was
was
loved the bits
so
with
much.
Marisol and her crew. And so when I was reading them, I was like, not that I don't love Dulce's parts, but I was like, this stuff is so cool. Like, why aren't I reading a book about these guys? And then of course I looked up the book and I was like, oh, that's because there is a book about these guys. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be
I
a
have to go
great
back.
TV series, I reckon. Like it has so many elements of action and adventure and
Yes.
suspense. And it's funny they call it a romantic suspense because I actually think there's at
Mm.
least 5 or 6 genres going on here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's
And so
hard to
many
classify.
characters being interwoven as well. You can't really categorize it as any one thing. There are, yeah, so many cogs turning. Yeah. Something
So I
that I
like,
thought
sorry.
about that I realized did I interrupt someone?
No, I interrupted you, which I do all the time, and you just need to tell me to shush.
I interrupt people as well, and it's fine. But I was thinking about the fact that like I just never see sex workers or ex-sex workers in romance fiction, except for Amy's book as Tesla Sue.
Yeah.
One of your stories was about a sex worker. When you get to that book in the series, she's finally able to retire, basically. Um, yeah, it's funny how we have to sanitize things, and I think part of what makes this book so different and why it challenges all genre conventions, but especially romance genre conventions, is that nothing is sanitized, like you were saying before. Um, but I wonder what kind of response she's gotten from readers for that, because Amy, I remember you mentioning that a lot of characters didn't like, I mean, a lot of readers didn't like
Yeah.
that character.
I think probably it was the least popular in the series.
Yeah.
Like,
Really?
yeah, but the most
Same.
popular one was a mother of 5 children, which I thought was really interesting. I wasn't expecting that either. But I can
Well,
see
mother, virgin, whore,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
lot going on. But you know, I think it's interesting that we still have so many complicated feelings around sex work,
Mm.
which is so tangled up in the way we think about women and sex and virgins and what true love is and what sex is with love. And, you know, there's this romance novel kind of, it's interesting. We're going to be doing Smut Month next month because,
Yeah.
you know, there's a feeling that when you meet the love of your life, it's suddenly real sex. Like it'll suddenly be better. Like
There was a
love
quote
will
in the book
equal
related to this.
exceptional, outstanding sex, and every sex you ever had in your past will not be as good as that just because you're in love.
Yeah, very
Um,
true. And you like let go of all those inhibitions and
yeah, your
Oh
everything.
yeah,
body
the
will
past
respond
doesn't
because your bodies will
count.
know each other.
Yeah, exactly. You're just linked.
There's a really good article, I think it's by Catherine Roach, just off the top of my head, but I might need to be double checked. But it talks about the mind-body split and about how romance novels are really good embodiments of how our culture still buys into the mind-body split, because romance novels will always have her body responding to him, even though she's like, no, but I don't like him. And yet
Yeah.
my pulse is racing and I'm suddenly like swoony, and he could be the biggest ass on the planet, but my body knows we're supposed to be together. And I always think of that there's this sense that women don't know their own bodies and don't know their own desires, and that if you have a physical response to someone, that must be also a moral and romantic response to someone. And we
Yeah,
have a
they're
lot of
both
narratives
very
around that.
connected. How
Yes,
interesting.
we do.
Yeah. There was a
Have you ever
quote
been
related to something you said before that I highlighted from the book. I can't remember what character says this, but I think it's another. Oh, I think it's when Dulce does her first interview as a journalist with an ex-sex worker, and she says uh, she's talking about women being controlled, women's sexuality being a force for him to own, for him to use and enjoy, and that's bullshit. And she says, every woman out there was sexually alive before you met her, and thank God, female sexuality isn't a flower that gets irreparably crumpled after a woman has sex. It's a surging force of nature. Before I married Kevin, my sexuality was alive and kicking. So she's just like, she's always, Aya de Léon is always challenging those narratives about sexuality, particularly women's sexuality. And yeah, I find that really interesting that there aren't many books like this where like women's sexuality is still so sanitized, and like that mind body split thing, it's like a way of maintaining purity if your body is
yeah.
responding but mentally you're not, kind of thing. Yeah.
And because like there's no judgment of her sex work in
Yeah.
the novel, so there's no sense of impurity. She's
Yes.
just a person doing things.
Especially
She's
because
not,
there are multiple characters who are sex workers portrayed, and you get to see how all of them think about the work that they've done, and some of them still like dabble in it from time to time
Yeah, I was going to say
when
there's
they
past
need
and
to.
present ones, which is interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
like members of the heist gang,
yeah.
they'll do it for the sake of a bigger cause. Like you're constantly seeing a lot of people who've dabbled in sex work. And that made me think about how even sex work in a way has become sanitized on social media. I feel like this is a sensitive thing to talk about, But there are so many influencers online now who are sex workers, and they sort of use their social media accounts to advertise their OnlyFans. But they are like the top 1% of people who are making six figures a month.
Mm.
They're so white, they're so privileged, they're so conventionally attractive. And it's kind of fooled people into thinking that that's what sex work is when it comes in so many different forms. Like everything that you see inside Chick Nation, you see so many different forms of sex work, and you see the kinds of people who are ushered into that life, and you see them, sometimes they have agency, sometimes they don't. Whereas I feel like at the moment there's almost like a dangerous narrative about how it's like a choice feminism type thing. I
Yeah,
don't know if
yeah.
that's the vibe. Like you can choose to do sex work and it's empowering and it's good. But
And
I
some
think,
people can, and some people can't.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's what's so, like you're saying, Peyton, is so interesting about this book is she's very comfortable in the mess of here are lots of different experiences. And then here's how that intersects with colonialism, but with the US's colonialism of Puerto Rico and parts of the global South, and how it intersects with climate crisis,
yeah,
which really impacts the global South and particularly people of color, particularly non-first world nations, like non-really super rich nations. And I think she's very good at kind of showing how people have to operate within all these systems, but without any judgment, or because I think you're right, like the choice feminism is about making it about an individual instead of a system.
yeah,
I feel like I cut you off, Abby. Sorry.
No, no, you're right. I was just going to say that, like, tacking on to what Peyton was saying about how kind of the younger generation is approaching sex work by how accessible it is to us now through social media, that whenever I've seen sex work in a novel or a romance novel now, mainly I'm talking indie here where it comes in, they're like the couple are doing sex work together, or I know that Harry
interesting.
has read a male-male romance where that's the case, or they're
Mm.
doing OnlyFans together, or there's no kind of, they're not having the same conversations around sex work and culture and sex work socially. They're kind of, they glaze over the sex work itself in
Like the bigger implications of it
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
exist.
So
Yeah,
it's really interesting what Aya de Leon's done here versus what I'm seeing being done now.
What I find so interesting is that there's not one point being made, and if anything, there's not really any point being made in the book. It's just showing the really, really messy reality from the
yeah,
viewpoint of somebody that's getting fucked up by this system. And it's so, like, I'll say it again, it's so overwhelming to read because, like, from, like, our standpoint's affected for sure. So, like, from a white cisgendered male perspective, I was like, damn, there's a lot in this book, and I'm used to like one or two things driving us through with the plot. But
Simplicity. We're used to
yeah,
simplicity, right?
and there is
yeah,
such a beautiful messiness to the way that she's describing all of this stuff. Like there's not chapters and chapters on the sex work, but it's so obvious that there's a lot of people in this book that are affected by this. But then they're also affected by poverty and by the
yeah,
withdrawing of US aid after the climate crisis. And it's all so beautifully woven in that it makes it so it's like in your face almost, but not in your like I don't know how to describe it. I was
She's
just
yeah,
yeah,
it's like making it visible. But
yeah.
it's actually really interesting, Harry, that you said that because in the author's note at the back, um, she talks about why she used this kind of genre because actually what she wanted to write about was Hurricane Maria. So she says, I'm going to read bits. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to
Yeah,
get
no,
them.
please read away because I haven't got the
I
piece of
can't speak better than she can speak. So Aya says, when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, I was developing a different storyline for my fourth Justice Hustlers book. However, as a member of the Puerto Rican diaspora, I couldn't think of anything more important to write about than the hurricane, and my editor and publisher supported me in changing course.
Hmm.
So she wants to think about how to write about the politics of climate crisis on her home, which is a kind of a colonial place that doesn't have rights, can't really vote. And then the US was minimizing what happened, right? Like was underrepresenting how many people died, was not
Yes.
giving enough aid.
Yep.
So it's a really political intent that she has. But then she talks about how she was writing within the confines of these feminist heist novels, that she already had this series set up. And I really love the way she talks about this because it's kind of how I feel about romance, that, people are quite dismissive of genre fiction, whether it's horror, romance, spy novels, whatever it is, crime, cozy mysteries. But she talks about it being like a haiku or a sonnet. So she says, like a haiku or a sonnet, genre and character function as a constraint to shape the story, like a predetermined syllable count or a rhyme scheme. And I think it's really interesting. She's a poet because there's this kind of acknowledgement of the possibilities of the
Yes.
scaffolding instead of the restrictions. So I
Mm.
was wondering what you guys think about that. Because you're all very political in your work. Like all of you are writing novels that are or designing games now, Millie, that have political intent. So I was wondering how you thought about that kind of scaffolding to talk about things like the climate.
Agreed.
Yeah.
100%.
Like that
I
is
I always
what
come back to thinking that like we talk a lot about how especially with romance shouldn't have to uh be realistic and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of keep that in mind as well, that like romance doesn't have to do anything, but we have this uh avenue here. We have this genre that thousands of millions of people are reading. Why not use it? What can I use your term, Amy, to Trojan horse it in? Because they're reading the books anyway. So why not just slip it in under the That's how I
that's
And
feel
you
about it.
and you
exactly
can't
what
be
Aya de Léon said.
apolitical.
No,
Sorry,
no,
you
true.
can't. I'll stop cutting everyone off in a second. I'll mute myself for good. But you can't be apolitical. So there's no neutral, right? There's no neutral choice.
The political is
Um,
personal.
yeah. Sorry, Peyton. I'm muting myself
No,
now.
you're fine. I'm talking too much. I was just gonna say, Millie, that's exactly. I listened to a podcast where Aya de Leon sort of introduces her publishing imprint, Fighting Chance Books, and what you said is exactly why she started it, because they focus on publishing genre fiction specifically. That's climate fiction, and related to what you said, Amy, when like her author's note about writing Side Chick Nation, she said she had other plans, but then the hurricane happened, and she was like, I could just take any book that I'm writing and turn it into a climate fiction book. And so now she's done that multiple times where she's like, I want to write this book about this couple doing this thing. I may as well make it a climate fiction book. I can make it a climate fiction book. And so I think it's really cool what her imprint is going to be doing, which is publishing genre fiction, which, like Millie said, it's what people are reading anyway, and then making those books climate fiction to Trojan horse it in.
It's interesting though because it feels like there's something taboo in that idea, but
Yeah.
there's not. Like
No.
it's just, and I think it goes back to the simplicity argument, the idea that we're so used to, well, I'm so used to simplicity in what I read, because it is all so white and privileged.
Do you
Like
think
for,
also there's an element of get back in your box? Like just go read your nice little novels and get back in your box?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But also I think from the complete other end of the spectrum, there's this argument of like, well, I should, this is my escapism. I should just be able to turn my brain off and read the book. And there's a
mm,
term for it, and I can't remember what it is, but it basically describes the privilege we have of being able to say that.
yeah, exactly.
There's so much conversation online at the moment, particularly in like book talk spaces, about how a lot of readers are saying that books aren't political or that romance books aren't political. And when all we're talking about here is how political they are or the possibilities they do have to be political. And I do wonder if there's a divide between readers and authors, in that authors, I think, actively are aware of the politics that they're putting into their book,
Mm.
hopefully. Um, but readers are kind of, I don't know if they turned a blind eye, or as you said, they're trying to turn their brain off when they read, but they just seem
Yeah.
to,
I
I don't
think we're
know.
not trained to do that. Like there's something in sociology, it's just called the sociological imagination, where you take events from everyday life and you place them in their broader context. Um, and the idea, if something is happening in your life, it's probably happening in thousands of people's lives. Therefore, it is a social thing and not an individual thing. I feel like people, when they're reading books, because they're not trained to think in that way. They're not good at placing books within context. And people also I don't know if people realize that thinking critically about something isn't criticizing it or hating on it. It is just describing the situation surrounding the novel, the implications of that novel. And like, then I think people feel like this is something that Alex mentioned when he was on the podcast. The idea that fiction should do anything is kind of wrong. It can do so many different things. And people think like, of course you can have your escapist novels. They're still going to be riddled with political implications anyways. And then you can have books, you can write books with a very political intent like Aya de Léon is doing. Like we can have all of these books and we can criticize, be critical of them, all of them, and you can
and of
be critical
ourselves,
of them
right?
and love them as well.
Yeah.
Like,
I wonder if the other thing that leapt to mind as you and Abby were speaking then was around joy, right? Is there's two things going on. One is privilege and one is a desire for joy. So when we talk about escapism, you know, joy has often been a revolutionary act, right? Like if a lot of you are looking at queer theory, and you know that's certainly a really big thing, the idea of queer joy, but also the idea for people reading romance that romance has been a space of joy, right? Where you're going for good feeling. You want to get the good feeling out of this book. You want to close the book and feel some warm and fuzzies for a change, or some lust, or something that is going to make you feel good. And so bringing in these kinds of disturbances to your thinking work against that a little bit. And I think that probably leads to a
But
kickback.
I feel like you can only do that, and this sort of goes back to what I was saying before. You can only do that if you are a white cishet person reading a
Yep.
white cishet romance, because
Yeah.
the second that you introduce any other factor, any other identity, that's already, even if that's your identity, that already has become political to other people too.
Yeah.
But the second you start introducing those things, you are introducing other factors. Like you can't talk about queer characters without kind of on the side introducing other things. You can't talk about black characters without introducing some of the politics. So it really is, it's like, well, if you're reading a white cishet romance book, then sure, you could probably get away with just thinking about joy.
Yeah.
But the second you add anything else in, immediately becomes political.
Yeah, 100%.
I think I got a lot of joy out of this book as well, though.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
also
both.
Yeah.
felt kind of galvanized because by spoiler alert, but I won't give too much away. But by the end, what you have is a character who's partnered in action.
Yes.
You know, like she's
Mm.
bolstered by being loved and loving and being cared for and caring for. And it's still got those elements of joy. I just wanted to circle back because I think Millie's points are just so spot on when it comes particularly to this book and the idea of climate crisis as well, because you know we are from a country that does commit huge climate crimes and has had its head in the sand for a very long time because we're very, very wealthy and don't want to lose our way of life and all that stuff. And I kind of get that because I like having, you know, heating and TVs and all these things. So I understand it, but also it's privilege, right? It's coming back to that idea, Millie, that although we are in the geographical south, we are not in the global south. We are wealthy. And when you talk about the global south with climate crisis, they're the people on the front line, right? Like Pacific Islands underwater and hurricanes and earthquakes, and without aid, without being able to protect against it. So I think your point about privilege is 100% spot on, that you can have joy, but you can't step away from the problems unless you are privileged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that idea of just let me have my escapism book really only applies to a certain subset of people.
Unless you like disappear into dragons, right? And then you can hide it a little bit more. You can't hide it, but you can hide it a little bit more. I think that might be behind some of the rise in fantasy, is running away from the real world.
I'm pretty confident now. I want more
They're so
books
political,
like
though.
this, though. Want more books like this now. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Thank God she's got a whole series. So
I know. When I was looking, I
off
was
we
like,
go.
damn, there was a lot of books in this series. I'm set.
On the topic of privilege as well, and this is kind of related, kind of not related, but what I really liked about this book in terms of climate fiction itself is that the main lead in this climate fiction is a black woman who was from a poor upbringing and was pimped out young and has been in that environment, and she kind of rises into activism. I feel like all of the climate fiction I was aware of before this month was that kind of dystopian, and all of the leads in those are like white male men, and they're the activists or they're the ones surviving in the climate fiction. And so it was really nice to have this sort of activism that kind of promotes anyone can become an activist. It's not just the
Yeah.
white men in privilege, because let's be real, the white men in privilege aren't actually doing anything for us. Like, especially the really the 1% at the top, they're not doing anything to fix the climate fiction. So I found that really
You're
interesting.
right, because she grows to activism in the book, which is
Yes.
kind of fun to see,
Yeah.
as opposed to appearing like, in those dystopian ones and then just being like, let's get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
follow me, everybody. And you're like,
I,
oh,
I feel like that relates to what Amy said the other week on the episode with Alex and Rachel, which is that the characters in these books don't have the privilege of being pessimistic about the future because they really don't have the privilege of thinking that far into the future when they're in survival mode and living so immediately all the time. And I think it's so interesting that the dystopian novels are so white centric because it's so defeatist. It's so easy for us white people to be like, oh, well, I tried to
Because
recycle my way to fixing this issue, but I guess recycling
because
doesn't do
right, it'll
anything.
only really truly start to affect us when it is a dystopia.
yeah.
Yes.
For for
Yeah.
other people, for other countries. And I was thinking, Amy, even when you were talking about Australia, we talk about it and we're
Yeah,
sitting
no.
very comfortably in the middle of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
city. I was thinking about like everyone in rural areas, and I was thinking about the bushfires that we were talking about on Melanie's episode.
And First Nations
It's
people.
already happening to
Yeah.
all these people, but we're like, oh, it'll affect us when it ends the world totally. And
There's
then we'll
actually-
start to get off our
And then when
asses.
it does, we'll be
Yeah.
the last one standing. Like the white men will be the last
Yeah.
one standing. What's with
We'll be
that?
the
We'll
ones
lead the way.
fighting.
Yeah.
I always think of The Road where it's like him and his son, and the mum can't cope, so she kills herself early on. She just goes out
Oh,
and
the Viggo
abandons her
Mortensen book.
child.
Yeah.
The movie's so
God,
The
God.
Viggo
depressing.
Mortensen book.
Yeah. Oh, movie.
I do like Viggo Mortensen.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're interested in the in climate research, there's a lot written, particularly by First Nations scholars, around how the apocalypse did come to First Nations
Yeah.
people. They have lived through the destruction of everything. And so they are not destroyed by it, right? There are First Nations people thriving and growing their culture and their languages and their connection to country. And so there is a lot we can learn from people who have lived through that kind of destruction. And who have different relationships with country, because I often think what we're actually doing is grieving our excess, right? We're just grieving the life we're living. Like those Mad Max style stories are like, oh, I grieve my big house and my yard and my TV and my fridge, and I'm like grieving having 3 cars, and I'm grieving the swimming pool. And we were talking about, I'm in a climate fiction researcher network, and we had a meeting this morning. We were talking about this, about how in many ways climate fiction has a kind of job to do around emotional labor, like around our emotions around what's happening and how we navigate grief, how we navigate imagining a future. And the other thing that we're really struggling with is, how do you imagine life beyond capitalism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is another thing that Aya de Léon mentioned in this podcast episode, that she was really focused on setting up her imprint, which is focusing on books that have that not positivity, but like the collectivism in them. You see people coming together and winning. Like she was very important about, she was very focused on or placing a lot of importance on narratives where the people come together and they win by the end of the novel. And she was sick of reading things where it's all already over and we're
Mm.
dealing with the fallout. She wants to read things where you actually see people trying. And she compared it to um, the hero's journey story structure. And she said that, like, emotionally, we feel like we're in the 11th hour right now. And we're in the black moment right now. And so this is the time where we're supposed to come together and, like defeat the antagonist kind of thing. Um, and she brought up a statistic from BBC, which was that anytime 3.5% of the population gets involved in a movement, historically that movement has won. And so all of these,
Wow.
all of these dystopian
3.5%.
novels tend to be like very individualistic and defeatist, etc., etc. And there's a place for books like that. Like Aya de Léon says, and I'm sure we would all agree, there's a place for books like that. You can write them. They're doing something important, obviously, but it's a shame that when forgetting about the importance of collective action and what we can actually do right now, things we can do if we come together to try and fix this
Yeah, there is an
issue.
interesting like compartmentalization almost at the moment where people are shrinking away in order to avoid the emotional term like thought of all of
Yeah,
the different
Yeah,
stuff.
and I've been wondering about this because I think, I mean, you mentioned community and collectivism, Peyton, but also this sense of meaning. Like the problem with extreme capitalism is it strips life of any meaning except consumption, right? We're sounding
yeah,
so like university people now, but seriously, like,
that's what we are.
yeah, it's
We're
like,
talking quite
yeah,
dreary
That's what you
about
get out of
sci-fi,
this podcast.
but
aren't we? We're talking really sad
Gotta
about
have
this.
no, yeah, I don't think it's sad, but I think, I mean, for me, what part of the action is, where is the meaning? Do you know? And
Mm,
I do think this explains the turn towards demagogues, the turn towards theocracy, looking for some meaning beyond the purely physical. Because if
yeah,
we're going to not be able to consume, if this is a house of cards that's falling down,
yeah,
what have you got left if you are not, if you're an atheist, for example, which I am, and
I,
if you I don't know, like it's a crisis of meaning. Like
yeah.
we have gotten so deep into extreme capitalism, we can't even imagine any other way of being anymore.
In the book Conspirituality, you know how disaster capitalism is a thing? So
Yeah.
a disaster will happen and capitalistic vultures will come and take advantage of it, which happens inside Chick Nation right at the beginning of the book.
yeah,
In Conspirituality, they might not have come up with it. It might have even been like Naomi Klein or something, but disaster spirituality. And so I think it makes sense that after COVID and a whole series of climate disasters and sort of the ongoing effects of COVID and new sicknesses coming in, we are being forced to confront our mortality and the meaninglessness of everything. And so it makes sense that people will turn to spiritual or almost like pseudo spiritual substitutes like
mm,
capitalism and Donald Trump
Mm.
and Elon Musk to inject meaning back into their lives. Because otherwise, like, where else are you going to find it? But I feel like that's one of the things that we get so wrong as people on the left is that we don't really do enough to tie people together with any kind of spirituality substitute
Mm.
kind of thing.
Yeah. I
that's an
mean,
interesting idea.
sorry.
No, sorry, no, I
Yeah.
was just gonna say that's actually
Yeah.
really interesting. The idea that that there's something that one side is kind of lacking, well, that we're all lacking, but that it's something that we all need to think a little bit more about.
And I
Yeah.
think it's interesting she has gravitated towards, I know it's a heist book and it's a feminist heist book, but it is also a romance.
Mm,
And what I think romance offers is love, is it's putting forward, like Catherine Roach says, it's like religions of love.
yeah.
And where if
Mm.
even if you're an atheist, like I'm a very big believer in human connection and in kindness and in care. And I really love Bell Hook's love ethic. And also there's a whole bunch of sort of different Black feminist and third world feminist scholars and activists who talk about care ethic. And I do think that's in this book, is this idea that she can turn to this community of women. In the end, she is one of them, but also family and home and country and then also your romantic sexual partner. That those connections are actually meaning.
And she's sending money over like back home to help her family, isn't she? Yes. So like that's also the connection across. It's not just a physical connection, not just a visual connection. She's having multiple instances of this throughout the whole novel, and some of these people aren't even really featured in the book because they're far away from her. So that is interesting. Yeah, the idea of human connection as some sort of spirituality replacement.
It's always something.
Yes, too, and I agree with human connection being integral to how we do things, because I don't think that there's anybody looking after me. Like, you know, like the only person that's going to look after me if I'm feeling a bit shit or having a bad day are the people that are around me.
You've
Your
got a lot
community.
too. You've got a big family,
Yeah,
a big
big
community, a
family.
loving partner.
Yeah.
That's something
You've
that
got
really
lots.
bothers me about like climate books and dystopian books, is it's always this idea of like everyone for themselves, one against another, when we know that that doesn't happen. Like we see that after things like climate disasters, you can see how much people band together as a community to help everyone else. Like we see that time and time again. Time and time again, we prove that even though obviously there's always going to be a subset of shit people in the world, mostly we're pretty good to eat. Like we do come together as a community. So that always really bothers me in dystopian stories, that like suddenly we're just going to forget that for some reason.
And the labor of love too, right? Like you only have to look at your life to see how much people care for each other. Do you know, like the minute I had a kid, I remember because the Iraq war was happening and Afghanistan had been invaded and all that stuff when I had my eldest. And he did not sleep for 4.5 years. I did not sleep a night through for 4.5 years.
Oh.
And I remember sitting up. I'd be so happy when the morning shows came on at about 4 a.m. The American morning shows would come on first, and I'd turn on this shit morning show because nothing else was on. And I would sit there and think, I cannot believe they are sending these boys to die, when some woman sat up for 4.5 years and didn't sleep to keep those boys alive, right?
Yeah.
And then you think, like, I look at people in my life who've nursed people through 10 years of cancer or disabilities or mental health issues or who have needed help themselves and been open to being loved and cared for. And you just sort of see that kind of that labor in your daily life. Like, and all of you perform it for people and they perform it for you. And I perform it for people and they perform it for me. And so I agree with you, Millie. Like, I think you just have to open your eyes and see those connections to know that's not going anywhere.
No. And Justina put a really good comment in the chat. She said kind of the other side of the coin of that more than human and post-human writing that we talked about, like right at the start of the month. It's kind of like the other end of the spectrum, like it's the human of it all.
Yeah.
I did want to, this is an aside, this is completely aside to our conversation, which has been fantastic, but I did want to acknowledge the chat as well, because they have been talking the whole time. So,
Oh, I'm not looking. So
no, I know. It's hard for us all to
I
be
kept
having
sort of waiting for a
conversation.
moment to interject with them, but
please.
like
what are some of the comments?
Book recommendations and all sorts of things, and just I mean mostly agreeing with us and saying very wonderful, coherent things. A great comment about Viggo Mortensen and Aragon, you know.
Yeah.
Rightly so.
Rightly so.
Rightly so.
So if you're an audio listener post-fact, it's definitely worth having a look in the live chat on our YouTube, because there has been some really good recommendations in there on more readings in this kind of space.
There's so much out there. I just feel like I'm so thrilled she started the imprint, because that's one thing we've been thinking for the last few years, Alex, Rachel and I, is that's what's needed, is this kind of engagement in a genre fiction space that acknowledges the space for action and connection instead of just being these bleak hellscapes.
You should try and get an interview with her if you haven't already.
Yeah, definitely. We actually share a publisher. I actually was with this publisher too for a while, so I might.
Oh, I thought you said we share a puppy. I was like,
Publisher.
what? How does that work?
Never met her, but we co-parent a dog.
Yeah,
We
no.
co-parent. Yeah. I was like, what the fuck?
It'd be such
That's
a shit
all
co-parenting,
about
man.
love and
She's just
connection.
had it for the last 10 years. I haven't visited.
What the fuck, Amy?
By the way, everyone, I know I've said this before, I actually made the snack today. I felt like I had
Yay!
to because I didn't last time. Except I started making it at like 6 p.m. and some of you were here at 6:30 and I was
Ambitious.
cooking and looking at the group chat going, oh my God, I'm not going to finish everything. They're really good.
Starting to bake melting moments at 6 p.m. when you have to be somewhere before
Is
7 is insanity.
insanity, yeah.
But you
My
kind
God.
of made it.
Flour. And then I called my mum and I was like, I wonder if she'll come with me to the supermarket. She was already at the supermarket.
Oh,
and
see,
she
that's
brought
love.
flour. I was like, whoa.
Amazing.
Human connection, see?
I did send my son out for limes and mint for the cocktail. I was not prepared. And I was like, can you just run down and get it? See, look at all the love labor happening around us.
Pip, pip, down to the supermarket.
Anyway, we'll have to circle back to climate fiction because we're only scraping the surface. And as we can see, it goes in directions you don't necessarily expect. And either way, like we have only just scratched the surface. And Justina and I had a really great conversation with Jennifer Mills, which came out last week. And there's so many good book recs in that episode as well. And yeah, we were talking about Orbital because I just read Orbital and I just loved it. Like it was poetic and but again, it was like a meditation. It wasn't bleak. It just was like a meditation. I feel this is so lame, but I feel this way watching Brian Cox documentaries. They're like spiritual without being
yes.
spiritual. I'm like transported.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
soothing about it.
But I feel like that about the nature. Like I'm such a dork. I can just spend an hour in my garden, like being ecstatic over the trees, just watching the sun through the leaves.
That's nice.
Especially your
There's nothing
backyard.
wrong with that.
Your backyard is stunning.
Yeah, that is a homey little place, actually. You could do a
Yeah,
little-
it's like I forget the whole world is out there.
Yeah, that's
and
the
then
plan.
when I'm in it, I'm like, oh my God. I'm gonna
Even
go
though
back
you've got
inside and
planes
actually
going
go.
overhead and cars going past, you wouldn't know you're in the city, hopefully. It's funny because a friend of mine said to me, I may have said this before, but when I write, I always put in all the trees and the flowers. I just mention everything by name. And she was like, why would this character know this? I'm like, she just does. All my characters do. They just do. I'm not taking it out.
Plus, I said so.
It's because everyone should know all the different names for all the different aspens. That's just a thing.
You're right.
Anyway, now that I've completely derailed the talk, thanks for joining us for our second live
Oh my God,
show.
are we done? Whoa.
We are. We're getting there. We're like 6 minutes away, so we've got a few things to do. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend. And as we said, there's a whole series. And Aya's new imprint. What's it called again? The imprint?
I
had it right here. And
it's
the end of the day.
Fighting Chance Books.
Fighting
with She
Chance
Writes
Books.
Press.
And I think it's worth kind of dipping into these if you've never thought you wanted to read a climate fiction because it was too bleak. These are the books for you. They're so much fun. There's a lot, as we said, there's a lot of intense stuff happening, but it's also a heist book. It's a romance. It's an action story. It's a suspense story. It's just so many things at once. And it just kind of goes in directions you just wouldn't expect. Like I never knew what was going to happen next. Anyway, we do have a copy that we were giving away this month, and I'm going to announce the winner. So hopefully she's listening. So the winner of Side Chick Nation, our giveaway for our book of the month this month was Kels Parham. Is that her name? Parham. So Kels, we will get you your book. Congratulations.
Yay.
And then Overstory was our other book we were giving away, which is a really interesting book that manages to deal with the non-human and the more than human as well as humanity. It's a really interesting book. It's also beautifully written and you can't put it down. And the winner this month was Carla Phillips. So congratulations, Carla. We'll get you your book as well. There will be
Thank you for entering the
announcements.
giveaway.
Yeah, thank you. And there were quite a few people who did. Sorry if you didn't win, but you can re-enter for next month because we're going to have 2 books to give away next month.
That's right.
Are we announcing tonight what we're
Can
doing
we
next
announce
month?
tonight?
Well,
Well, we've got
surely
the-
we can put out. I think you already said at the very beginning what.
Oh, you did. You said
I
we were
did.
doing
You already said
smut.
what the theme of the
I
month.
said
Ah!
By the way, everyone, it's Smut Month.
Yeah.
Well, we've got the announcement, but anyone listening gets extra special. We just won't put it on a reel.
Yes.
Harry, you've got one of the books we're giving away. Do you have it?
Is that Smart Month?
Weren't you giving away Smart
Yeah.
Month books? Yes, you were. You have one of the copies.
Oh, BS by CL?
No,
No?
I'm doing no.
The other one.
Harry
Oh,
can
no.
announce his later
Harry's-
once
Harry
he's
can
sorted
announce his
himself
later.
out.
They'll
I'll announce mine
them for the
later.
month. We're going to do
Once he's
Smart
remembered
Month
what it is.
because Smart is huge right now. If you haven't noticed, everyone wants a bit of smart.
What?
But then there are also people who are a little bit wary of calling it smart and have kind of like there's these weird kind of puritanical ideas around it as well. So we thought we'd dive into talking about sex. We're going to talk about smut and fantasy, so romantasy books. We're going to talk about what else are we talking about?
Smart
What's
and
the next one?
rom-coms.
Oh, smart and rom-coms and talking
Rom-coms.
particularly about like lines around pornography and female sexual pleasure. We're going to talk about we're going to got a really special interview actually, which I'm just going to announce now. So our book of the month is Christina Lauren's Beautiful Bastard. Did actually order the new release, but I can't get it in Australia, which is driving me nuts.
Oh, I know.
We all have ordered a copy of the new one and we keep getting an old one.
Yeah.
I know,
So-
I've got multiple copies of this one.
So this one is having an anniversary year this year, so they've done a re-release of the whole series. So if you live in North America, you can get the re-release, which has a beautiful rainbow cover.
If you
Um,
want to
if you-
send them to us from North America,
please.
that would be great.
And so we're really, really fortunate next month to be interviewing Christina and Lauren about the re-release of this book and about all things smutty. And it will be fun.
Oh, I know what mine is. Mine's
Yeah, I
the
thought
one,
you'd
isn't it?
remember. Have you got it there to show
The gay
people?
one?
Yeah, the gay one,
Yeah.
Harry.
Yeah, that's somewhere
So-
back in that other room. I'll
So
find it.
we'll be giving this one away. And then Harry has got a really smutty book to give away
Yeah, I
as
got
well.
Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Haleran. It's a gay, like kind of pulp fiction-y book, back
Nice.
from about 1980, I believe. I could be wrong. Could be
Amazing.
1988.
Retro smut.
Ooh.
Retro
there
smut.
is-
smut.
There is some smut in the book, but it's also just like overly very sexual. So
Right.
I thought it would be a great
Nice.
pick.
So everyone
Yeah.
gear up to enter to win one of those books. And join us next week. Oh no, next week we're starting, right? I've lost track of what time it is. It is the
Yes.
end of the month. So
Yeah.
next
End of
week,
next week. Yeah.
end of next week we'll start Smut Month. Look, don't
You
blame
said
me.
anything. You
I'm
just
on deadline. I'm
You're
on
like,
deadline. Leave me
uh,
be. I mean, I've gone through some space-time continuum at the moment. I don't know where I am.
if you're in the future, is it looking good?
Oh, well, it will be done. The book will be done in the future. It will be
We need to
over.
make
Thanks for
T-shirts
listening
that
in,
say, like-
chat. Just by the way, thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
We
you.
super appreciate everyone listening and commenting, and thank you for being active on Facebook and on Instagram and on the live chat. And thank you, Justina, for being there, even though you're sick. I hope you enjoyed your melting moments and your mojito or mojito. And thank you guys, for coming along and having a chat and putting up with me talking over you.
Oh, it's
Really
always a
appreciate
pleasure.
Most
Well, you
Thank you
do
for
it.
putting up with
Yeah.
me talking over you. I think I'm going to get you a T-shirt, by the way, Amy, that says
Yeah.
something like, "Don't hate me, I'm on deadline," or and then you don't
I
have to
just-
explain yourself.
I'll
Just wear
never
it.
have to
Oh,
take it off. I just
we get a Facebook
lately.
map?
A cap and that t-shirt.
Yeah, get her a cap. Love it.
Oh, look, I almost introduced tonight by saying it's lucky I'm not in the cap. Because, like, when I'm on deadline, but usually I turn up to meet these guys and I'm in workout gear and my cap on to hide the fact I haven't got any makeup on.
You do have a lot of energy right now. I'm pleasantly surprised for
Yeah.
7 p.m. on a Thursday. I thought you would be.
Yeah. It's been a long day. I'm probably hysterical now. Anyway, thank you for joining us. It's been actually really fun to talk about climate all month, even though I think it kind of illustrates that it's not all doom and gloom, that there are others out there working and connecting and looking for how we imagine a better future. So thanks for joining me, guys. See you, Peyton, see you, Millie, see you, Harry, see you, Abby, see you, Justina on the chat, and see everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Amy And is hosted by Amy Matthews, Abby Guy, Peyton Hogan, Justina Ashman, Harry Stewart and Millie Heffernan. This podcast is recorded on Gardenland with music by Anthony Wignall and Mass Wisteria. Our logos and branding are designed by Abby Guy. This episode was edited by Abby Guy.